Hi there. Okay, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be a double one. Since I'm posting both of this is the second of of the second video on reading Plato's Republic, Book One. I'm Cliff Bates again. This is the second video for the same day, posting on the same day, on September 1st. Why? Usually, on Fridays I have either a live stream between the end of the month, a new month, there'll be a new live stream. But September 1st, I have an obligation at the university. My students are, I'm part of a class that's having their resit exam, and I might have to be there after. In fact, I'll be traveling the day before. I will be away for the next couple of weeks. The last, the, I'll be the day before this first. I probably will be returning to the city. So right this day, I'll probably be at the university and not be able to make any videos, do a live stream as I normally do. So I decided to post my video. Now, the first video, I made a boo-boo. I hit the shut off button before I could do my ending. So I'm gonna start my thing with the ending I normally do. That is, if you like it, please like it. If you whatever I do, now don't do it now. You don't do it now. But at the end of the video, if you like the video, like the video. Anytime you're in a video, you have comments or questions, please put it below. And I will, if you have any comment at the end of the video or at the end of the previous video, put comments or questions below, and I will do this. Like it, share it with a friend. If you like it, hit the like button, share it with a friend, share it with your media, social media. If you didn't like it, okay, thumb it down, okay? I will end the video. At the end of the video, I will do the other information. I'll stop here now, returning to this. We finished the first one looking at the introduction, okay? The introduction, book one, which has Socrates going down to the Piraeus, going back, then Polemarchus and Glaucon catch him, stop him, coerce him, then show all this big deal. Then they arrive at there's going to be a big party. First there's going to be, we outnumber you. Now come, go back to the party. And we are left with a introduction of them going, kind of agreeing to this thing. If this seems just, so what is done out of coercion, and coercion is now seemed like a consensus. Socrates ends it with, if this seems good, then we will do it, right? Now they go to Polemarchus' house, and at Polemarchus' house, Cephalus, Polemarchus is not Polemarchus, Cephalus' house. Polemarchus' house, which was his father really owns it. There is not only his father, but there's other people. We mentioned them. There's let's go move our thing over here. Right, let's go do. So not only is the four of them, no, five of them, because remember Socrates, Glaucon, Polemarchus, Adeimantus, and Nicotides. Now there is what? Who else is there? It's Lysias, Euthydemus, then Thrasymachus, Commodeian, and Cephalon, plus also later Cephalus' father. Right, so 10 people. Who are citizens? I think Lysias is a citizen. Euthydemus, being Polemarchus' brother, are not citizens. I think they're aliens. So Cleophon is clearly a citizen, but the other two, they're mentioned by name. So therefore, Lysias, and actually they're very interesting. They don't mention the fact that Socrates is interested. He treats them though they're citizens, but they're not really citizens. They're foreigners. If you more look into the background of Cephalus and his sons, right? The family. Cephalus' son Polemarchus will play a very important role in the restoration of the democracy, as with Cleophon, right? I think it's Cleophon, if I remember correctly. Uh, 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 okay, it's no here I confuse the Clariphon versus Cleophon. This is one of those. Oh, maybe the same. Clariphon is the guy who's Socrates' right hand buddy, who always with him, like this very young guy who's like this very eager, very excessive. He's with he's the guy we see this in the Gorgias, role plays in the Gorgias. Cleophon here there's a dialogue named after him. He's the one that's a weird dialogue where almost Socrates has nothing in it, right? That's the whole weird thing about Cleophon. So is a different person. It is kind of a question of not ignorance, a man of ignorance, whereas the other one, Clariphon, is the one that's famous for this being known as being someone who dies trying to restore democracy. Well, Polemarchus likewise dies trying to restore democracy. So the restore the democracy from the oligarchy after uh, 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 when the aristocrats and the 30 tyrants impose their order on it, right? Um, this is why this is important understanding of the background of this. I think the background here. So we're back at we have the thing at this, and what's Polemarchus' father was also inside the house, right? Now, this is the thing. He seemed to me, this is Socrates saying this. He seemed, again, this is all Socrates reporting the things, and then he's repeating who's saying it, right? So reported by Socrates. So it's reported, this is him recounting something that happened yesterday. Um, in other words, this is something that happened because yesterday, right? He's reporting the day before, the events the day before. Um, and he says that he seemed to me very old, for I was seeing him after some intervals of time, so I haven't seen him in a while. He was sitting crowned with wreaths on a sort of headrest seat, for he had just been sacrificing in the inner courtyard. So, in other words, he's been showing piety, showing aspects of piety. Showing aspects of piety. He was just sacrificing. He just had the wreaths on his head. He looks old. He's an older man. I haven't seen him in a long time. Something like this, and he's at the headrest seat of this because he's been sacrificing in the courtyard. So we sat by him, since some seats were set up there in a circle. So therefore, this idea, and he was sitting here on the headrest, and he was sat by him. Right, seeing me then, Cephalus greeted me right away and said, Socrates, you don't often come down to the Piraeus to visit us, but you ought to. For if I still had the power to travel easily in the city, there would be no need for you to come here, since we would come to you. Right, this idea. But so the idea is, if I was younger and stronger, if I was better condition, I'd go to you. But you don't come down here longer. You should come see me. If I was better, I was stronger, I would go see you. But there'd be no need for you to do that. But this idea like this, right? Uh, 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 um, but you now ought to come here more often. So therefore, you ought to come down here more often. You can be sure that just as much as the other pleasures, in other words, all of a sudden he said, come down here more. And he goes, but you can be sure that just as the other pleasures, the one that depends on the body, are withering away with me, that how much the desires and pleasures of having to do with talk are growing. So all of a sudden he's saying that, okay, you come down here, we're going to talk. I like as I get older, the body doesn't, the pleasures of the body seem less and less important, and rather the pleasures of talk grow more. Now this is interesting, the idea of this pleasures of talk. That and I miss you. You should come down here. It's hard for me to go up there, go up the high of the city to get you. Maybe you should come down here more. And because I right now enjoy the pleasure of talk, right? Discussion, debate, logo, right? Talk, words, right? Speaking and talking, right? Don't fail then, do this. Don't fail then to do this. Spend time with these youngsters, but also come visit us here regularly as you would your friends and your own very kin. So therefore, it's very interesting. The idea is that okay, do come actually come down. Don't talk with the young ones. Don't pay so much attention to the young ones. Of course, come down here and go talk with the young ones, but don't ignore your friends and your kin. Treat me as your friends and kin. Right? Really, Cephalus? I said, I enjoy talking with those who are very old, uh, um, who are very old, very much. For it seems to me one ought to learn from them, as from those who have gone before us down to the certain road, which we too, no doubt, will have to travel. About what sort of road it is, rough and hard, or easy, and readily transferable, right? This idea that how is the road? How is the road that you're going down? Is it something easy? Is it tough? I'm going to. I enjoy talking with these people because it teaches me what I'm going to endure. Basically, it's basically saying that It's something to learn. I like talking to people who are very old, very old. Why? Because this way I know I'm going to have to what is awaiting me down the road. Again, alluding to maybe okay. And from you especially, I would be glad to learn how this looks to you, since you are just now at the point of life where the poet says is on the doorstep out of old age. Whether it is a hard part of life, or how you report it. So you're at the age where the poet says this is on the doorstep out of old age. So you're coming out of old age, right? This into old age in that sense, right? And it's good. I would like to know what you think about this. Is it really the hard part of life, or how do you report it, right? Now he reports by Zeus, again, the god, invoking the god, the authority of the god. By Zeus, he says, I'll tell you what it looks like, at least to me. For often some of us get together who are just about the same age, keeping the old proverb going, right? Those of like, right? Now most of us complain when we're together, yearning for the pleasures in youth and rem- um, reminding ourselves, reminiscing about sexual indulgence and about drinking binges and feasts and certain other matters that are involved in those sort of things. And they get irritable as though they have been deprived of some great thing, and as though they've lived well then, but now they're not. Now they're not even living. So therefore, it's like okay, many of these guys who come to talk to about these, we talk. All of us come together. We're similar. Most of them get really angry. They remember how great it was when I was young. I was young. I remember about my sex, my pleasures of the youth, reminding them of my great sex and drinking and feast, and now I can't do it. Life was much better than deprived. They get irritable, he says, because they feel deprived, and life is better back then, right? Um, and they're not even as though they've lived well then, but aren't living. They weren't even living now, right? And some also bewail the way the old are treated like dirt by their families. And they sing a lament on this theme about all the troubles old age has been responsible for them. Okay, this is how many of these people. But Socrates, they don't seem to me to be blaming what's responsible. They don't seem to me to be blaming what is responsible. For if this were the responsible thing, I would too have suffered these same things on account of old age, as would anyone else who had come to this point of life. But as it is, I have met up before with others who were not in this condition, especially when I was nearby the poet Sophocles, when he was asked by someone, "Hey, Sophocles, how are you doing with sex? Can you still be with the woman?" And he said, "Hush, fellow, I escaped. I escaped it most happily indeed, as if I ran away from some raging savage master." Right? In other words, he says, he says, he then into the thing. He gives the recipe of Sophocles. Right? Sophocles is asked by someone, "Hey, how is it with sex? Can you do it with the women?" And I said, "Hush! Don't say this. I've escaped and I ran away from some ravaged savage master." Right. So I have in other words, he's like more like Sophocles. He says, "I have others who don't save this condition, and I especially nearby the poet Sophocles, especially when I was nearby, he's witnessed Sophocles when he was asked by this thing." So this is not just a wise tale, but something Cephalus witnessed Sophocles, the great poet, said. Um, um, he goes. He seemed to me then to be speaking well, and no less so now. For in every way, a great peace and freedom from such things comes to pass in old age, right? Idea that no longer driven by sex and lust and desires, My desires have gone through, and therefore words now, discussion now matters more, right? When the desire stops, in other words, when the desire stops straining and slacking, Sophocles' word comes to pass in every day. And it's a release from the very many insane masters. So I'm not driven by so many masters. Um, this may explain, in other words, this unerotic, de-erotic, in other words, that desire, in other words, remember what desire is. Desire is eros, desire, want. And that he's saying that now desire is gone. Desire for the body, things of the body are less than him in that sense. And therefore, things of the words, meaning, and that's what he says, that these insane masters, these desires of the body, are masters, and that's despotes, who irrational, not insane. That is a logoso. I think it's in that sense, right? Without reason, right? But in regards to these things, but also those that have to do with families, there is one particular cause, not old age, Socrates, but the disposition of the peoples, therefore the character of the people, the peoples and their disposition. For if they are orderly and peaceable, even old age is a burden within bounds. But if they aren't, Socrates, both old age and youth turn out hard for such a person. So therefore, it's a the word Socrates. It's not that old age is the problem. It's because the character of people you're around. It's your disposition of the people who you're around. And if they're orderly and peaceable, even old age is a burden within bounds. But if they're not, old age and youth can be hard for such a person, right? And I felt admiration for him saying these things and wanting him to say more. I said, to nudge him on, Cephalus. I imagine when you say these things, most people don't accept them from you, but regard you as bearing old age easily, not on account of your disposition, but because you possess great wealth. For they say the rich people have many consolations, right? So that's okay. He says, "This is the real reason you're not. You can say this is not because of this, but rather because of your wealth, and that being wealthy makes therefore an old person who's wealthy has more consolations than a man who's poor, right?" And he goes, "You're telling the truth," he said. "You're telling the truth. And most people will think this, right? They don't accept them, and they have a point, though not as much as the one they imagine. Instead of the saying of Themistocles holds well, that is, the Themistocles holds well, to a Sapphirian who was insulting him and saying that he was well regarded not on his own account but on account of his city. He replied that neither he himself, if he were a Cyprian, nor that man, if he were an Athenian, would have become notable. Notice. In other words, it wasn't that Athens made it. He said, "Listen." He said that neither he himself, if he were a Scythian, nor that man, if he would have become notable. So yes, the city does make this. In fact, I am this. I'm an Athenian. Help me, right? But not everyone would have been helped this. But it's not only that; it's that I am both who I am and my ability, and that, right? And for those who are not rich, and bear old age with difficulty, the same statement holds well. That a decent person would not bear old age very easily at all with poverty, but neither would someone who was not decent, even though he were rich, ever come to peace with himself. So it's known that yes, old age and poverty is bad because poverty is maybe a bad thing in that sense. So maybe that's true, but if they were bad character, they would not peace with themselves, and they were bad character, they weren't decent. They would suffer. It would be just as bad as being poor in that sense. But Cephalus, I said, did you inherit the greatest part of what you possess or acquire. That is, you inherit it or acquire it. What sort of acquisition did I make, Socrates? He said, one that makes me a sort of mean as the moneymaker between my grandfather and my father, or my grandfather and a namesake have an inherent pretty nearly as much wealth as I now possess, made it many times as much. But my father, Lysanus, made it even less than it is now. But I am satisfied if I leave these boys not less, but but not less, but some little amount more than I inherited. In other words, how did you inherit and acquire? He says, listen, there were some who made much more. My father made much less. The idea is I'm going to leave as much, little bit more than I was given. My the reason I asked, the reason I asked really, Socrates, is that you seem to me not to have a very strong love of money. And this is the way people are, for the most part, who don't acquire it themselves, while those who did acquire it cling to it twice as lovingly as others. So this is the difference. Those who make, in other words, those who inherit money have less love of the money makers and their love of something. So therefore, the idea that money making, those who do it would be like, okay, this is the famous argument. Money people who make the money now love money a lot. The people who make the money to acquire it, love who acquire. Those who acquire really love it, and they really don't want to go away from it. But those who inherit money, this is the difference between new wealth and old wealth. It's the famous thing, and Socrates repeating this perception that those who love are acquired make themselves love it, but you don't have the love. You Cephalus don't really have that same intensity of love of money than those who do acquire new wealth, right? Um, while those who did acquire it cling to it twice as lovingly as others. As poets love their own poems, fathers love their own children. In this way, moneymakers take their money seriously as their own work, as well as for its use the same way that other people's do, right? That is, in other words, the poets love their poem, fathers love their children. Moneymakers take their money seriously as their own work, right? Their action, and therefore use in the way for its use the same way as other people's do. In other words, they as well as they use it the same way other people. They use it. They may use it as people, but they take it more seriously in that sense. So they are hard even to abound, since they're not willing to praise anything other than their riches. You're telling the truth, Kepler says. Very much so, I said. But tell Socrates, right? But tell me this much more. What do you suggest as the greatest good you've enjoyed from possessing this great wealth? What is the greatest gift you in other words, okay, this is true. You're saying true. I can understand what you're saying. So, what is the greatest good that you've gotten through this wealth? Socrates asks him. Something, he said, that I probably wouldn't persuade many people of when I say it. Okay, something that is something you can be sure, Socrates. And he went on that when someone is close to imagining that he's coming to the end, fear and care comes into him about things that didn't enter his thoughts before, right? So therefore, in other words, as you come to old age, you start realizing, you start having certain things that you didn't fear, certain fears, and coming to an end. Fears and cares come into to one that and about things that you didn't think about before, right? For the stories we are told about the things in Hades realm, about how the one who committed injustice here must pay the penalty there. Stories he often scoffed up to that time. now twist his soul and fear with a fear that they're true. So therefore, now this is Cephalus repeating this, right? This is Cephalus saying the people didn't believe him at the time when they were younger, they didn't believe it, but now they come to think maybe they're true, right? Because I'm facing death now, right? And he, the person who did this, either from weakness of old age or since or since he discerns something more of the things there, being already closer to them, becomes filled with suspicion and terror. And he totals up his account to that time and examines whether he has done any injustice to anyone. Now one finds many injustices in his own life, many of just of his own life, of his own in his life, even wakes up. Sorry. Now, one who finds many injustices of his own in his life, even wakes up often from sleep and terror, the way children do, and he lives in expectations of evil. Right? Oh my God! I'm gonna. So therefore, this is the. He's not speaking of himself. He's speaking to some of everyone else. This is the reason why. He says, "Listen, I have been. In other words, wealth has given me something that, and if I say this, people are going to believe me. But listen, there is this idea that as we get older, we realize the reality of as we face death. We then we maybe think about that what we dismissed as young may be true, that there's punishment for our evil deeds. We then review our lives and discover that the evil deeds we've done, and then therefore we fear that we're going to be punished. We're going to he expects the evil to be done for our evil, right? But to one who is conscious of no injustice in himself, a pleasant and good hope is always present to nourish his old age, as Pindar put it. So if you don't, in other words, if you've not done evil and done these things, so if you're old and you've done evil and you're thinking about this and you realize this guy's going to be punishment, oh my God, I'm going to get punished, and we're expecting evil to happen to you. But in other words, however, if you've done no evil in your life, you're conscious of no injustice in himself. A pleasant and good hope is always present to nourish his old age, as Pindar put it. He quotes Pindar and says, "For truly graceful Socrates, he says this, as one who lives out his age in just and holy way, justice and holy, divine way. And sweet it gathers at him at heart, nourishing his old age. Hope that most surely steers the much twisting purposes of mortals." In other words, he gives this Pindar quote, right? The quote from Pindar from poetry. So, well, he says it, wonderfully so. How much, how much so? And it is for this very thing that I, for my part, hold the possession of money to be of its greatest worth, not for every man, but for a decent and orderly one. So in other words, for not in other words, so it's not that every man does this, but that's for money. Wealth is useful for what for basically saying for a man who's decent and orderly man, right? So it's not that it's decent for it's not useful. This wealth is not useful for everyone. The thing that I hold my possession of money to be the greatest worth, not because it's going to be worthy because I have money and comfort, but it can be that money could be a detriment if I'm a bad person, right? He says, for not having cheated or lied to anyone unwillingly, and for not departing for there in fear, owing any sacrifice to a god or money to a human being, in great part, the possessions of money makes a contribution, and it does not have, and it does have many other uses. But setting one thing against the other, right? I, for my part, would put down to this: for a man with any sense, Socrates, the greatest use for riches, in other words, that they would be able to do good things, right? In other words, their possession of the money makes contributions to doing things, right? I've not done any harm. I can also do just good deeds with it. And in other words, do what is both just and holy, right? It helps me to do, basically saying is that the money helps you to do just things and holy things, right? So I put it for a man. For my part, I would I would put down to this: for a man with any sense, Socrates, the greatest use for riches is to being able to these things, right? It does have other uses, but these things, setting these things against the other, doing these things, sacrifice, paying what is owed to you, and using money to owing sacrifice to the gods and money to human beings, paying off those obligations. Wholly beautiful are the things you're saying, Cephalus, Socrates says, right? But about this very thing, justice, shall we simply claim in this way that it is true, and giving back everything one takes from another? In other words, is it simply the case that you should pay what you owe, give back what you taken? You've taken something, you should give it back. In other words, you should pay back what you owe. You should give back what you owe. Pay what you owe. And if you owe the gods sacrifices, you give the gods sacrifice. If you owe people some money or you give retribution or recompense, right? You pay your debts, right? Pay your debts. Um, uh, Make your sacrifices to the gods and pay your debts, right? This is the kind of Cephalus, and that it helps you to do this. And this is beautiful, but is it what you're saying is true? That claim in this way is the truth? Or is it true that justice is paying debts and keeping promises? Or is it possible these various things, sometimes justly and sometimes unjustly, will vary? These things, that these very things, sometimes justly, and in other words, it's possible that these things, I think, these very things sometimes are just and sometimes they're unjust, right? I mean, for instance, this sort of thing. Surely everyone would say, if I were to receive a weapon from a friend, a man of sound mind, and he kept demanding them back when out of his mind, that one ought not to give back things of that sort, or that anyone who had given them back would not be just, and neither would anyone who was willing to tell all the truth to a person in that condition, right? In other words, that a person who's out of his mind to tell them all the truth, right? Tell truth, but the reality, the truth about something, being blunt about this, not just to do that. So therefore, there's conditions that you're not keeping your promise. You own this. You owed something, borrowed a weapon, and he demands it back, and it's out of his mind. In other words, is it not? He goes, you're right. Then this is not the definition of justice, to tell the truth and give back. In other words, then this is not the definition of justice, to tell the truth and to give back what one takes. So this is the definition that he seems to possess: to tell the truth and to uh, 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 give back one's debts, pay his debts. It most certainly is, Socrates, says Polemarchus. Polemarchus interrupts, breaking in. At least if one ought to believe Simonides at all. So Polemarchus interrupts and says, yes, it is. Inserts, so yes, it is. If we're going to believe Simonides, and goes, well, indeed, says Cephalus. And I hand over the discussion to you folks, since I need to take care of the sacrifices now. He's going to be taking the sacrifices. So I'm heir to the share in what is yours, says Polemarchus. Quite so, he said with a laugh. And as he did, he went off to make the sacrifices. So what happens is Polemarchus, we have this first ending. The first ending here is the sacrifices of Cephalus' argument. Cephalus ends the discussion and he transfers it. Now, why is he leaving? He's leaving the sacrifice to the gods. In other words, he's more concerned with doing than talking, even though he said before he was concerned with talking. Why is he not doing this? In fact, this is the Bloom's argument, that is with with Cephalus' absence, the removal, the gods are removed. This is Allan Blooms' famous argument that with Cephalus, the gods remove, right, are no longer present amongst us. I'm not sure. I've never been wholly convinced by that, but it's a point. But Cephalus doesn't find it necessary. So this kind of questions the argument of come down and talk to me. I want to talk about these things. No, he doesn't necessarily want to talk about them, maybe, or that making sacrificing to the gods is more important than philosophy in that sense. Discussion these things. So maybe now I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to keep my ritual sacrifice, and I'm going to let it. And I'm going to let the son is going to inherit the discussion of the father. Well, with this end, we're going to our next video will start on Polemarchus's discussion. And Polemarchus first begins with his argument from the father, takes up his father's argument, and then gives his own. Right. So we stop here. Okay. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below about this. As I said in the beginning of the thing, like it. Okay. Again, do that. You can follow me on social media. The links are below. You can follow me also on, if you're not subscribe. But again, follow me on social media. Links are below if you want to. You can follow my academic links, the academics, social media links, and also, stuff about my research and things. There are links available below. If you want to help me do what I do here, you can do by becoming a member, subscribe to our Patreon, $1 or $5 a month like that. If you want to do that, you want us to send me money, you can do it to PayPal or something like that, or Google or okay, whatever. You want to help, be a patron, help, but you're giving it free. Okay, yes, if you want to help me do this, this is the way you can help. Another way you can help is buy one of my books. And please go think about buying one of my books. You can, and actually, they're available through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any online bookseller, or go to a bookstore. Maybe order it for them if it's available. I don't think it's going to be all available. If you're going to want to help me more, buy the Lulu book, book published by Lulu, and buy it by Lulu. Because if you buy it by Amazon, the Lulu book by Amazon makes a profit from it. And if you buy it by Lulu, the profit that Amazon would, or any bookstore make, I would get. So you help me more. Well, that's it. I stop here. Take care, and we'll continue this looking at how Polemarchus takes up after this. Take care. Bye bye.